Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Glad to be here.
Today, we're diving into quite an interesting source. It's a transcript looking at the book of Philippians. And it's got this very direct title. If you don't strive to live according to the word, you will drift in the world.
Yeah, that title definitely grabs you, doesn't it? It sets a strong tone right away.
It really does. So our mission today is to unpack the core message, the key insights from this particular deep dive into Philippians, specifically for you listening.
Right. And this source puts a lot of weight on understanding the context first.
Okay, let's start there then. The transcript says don't just jump into the deep meanings immediately. Look at the big picture for Philippians. Why is that so crucial, according to this source?
Well, the point it makes is that Philippians is different from some other letters Paul wrote, unlike, say, writing to the Corinthians or Galatians, where he was tackling pretty major problems or doctrinal errors. This wasn't primarily a letter of rebuke. It wasn't even focused on laying out lots of dense new doctrine or clarifying big theological questions like the second coming, which some of his other prison letters got into.
So Paul wasn't chewing them out or correcting massive mistakes here.
Exactly. The source really emphasizes that it comes from a place of genuine gratitude. Paul's under house arrest, right? And the Philippian church, these believers, they had shown him just incredible love and practical support.
So it starts almost like a thank you note.
Pretty much, yeah. A thank you note that then sort of develops into what the source calls preventative teaching.
Preventative teaching. How does the source explain that shift?
It suggests Paul, maybe seeing issues cropping up in other churches he knew, wanted to share some guidance with the Philippians before similar problems could really take root there. It wasn't scolding. It was this really heartfelt desire for them to live out their calling, to be the saints God called them to be. And the source argues that understanding that motivation, the gratitude, the preventative care helps us interpret the whole letter in a much, healthier way.
That really does shift the perspective. You stop looking for arguments and start seeing this pastoral encouragement for people he genuinely cared about.
And what's really insightful, I think, from this source is how it connects that loving context to the core message about striving. Because even in what seems like a pretty healthy, supportive church like Philippi,
right,
living according to God's word isn't presented as something that just, happens passively.
Which brings us right back to that really strong word in the title, strive.
Exactly. The source hammers this point home. It takes active effort. It's not just passive belief. When Paul talks in chapter 2 about being like-minded, having the same love, being one in spirit and purpose, the source says that's not just a nice idea. It's a call to diligently pursue that unity and mindset.
And things like avoiding selfish ambition, valuing others' interests above your own. I mean, that definitely feels like swimming upstream, doesn't it? It's active work against maybe our natural tendencies.
It absolutely is. And the source highlights how Paul immediately points to Jesus in Philippians 2 as the ultimate example of this. Jesus, though God, actively chose to empty himself, right? He took on human form, became obedient.
Not passively, but actively obedient.
Yes, actively aligning his will with God's, even to the point of death on a cross. The source frames this as active humility, active obedience. That's the model.
So living unified for the mission, considering others first.
Yeah.
These aren't just states you achieve. They require constant, active, dedicated striving, regrounded in valuing God's word.
That's the core argument. And the source warns, pretty starkly actually, that without this focused effort, even people in a church can become, complacent, indifferent. They might start making excuses, complaining, and eventually just drift. Like it mentions the Roman church, suggesting they became kind of absorbed in their own internal affairs and lost that outward focus, just drifting along.
But it's not all warning, is it? The source also highlights positive examples from Philippians 2, people who did strive. Timothy, for example.
Right. Paul wanted to send Timothy specifically because, unlike others who were mostly looking out for number one, Timothy genuinely cared about how the Philippians were doing. He served alongside Paul like a son with his father. That's real dedication.
And Epaphroditus, too. The source mentions how he risked his life serving Paul, got incredibly sick doing it. It says he did not spare his own life for the work. That's pretty intense striving.
Definitely. The source uses both Timothy and Epaphroditus as powerful examples of people who shared Paul's heart and purpose. They were actively obeying, actively serving, adding momentum, not acting like a drag on the mission.
So, okay, wrapping this up. What does this deep dive suggest this all means for you listening? It seems to show that living God's way, unity, humility, active obedience, it isn't passive. It really does require that striving.
And the examples of Jesus, Timothy, Epaphroditus, they really drive home what that dedication looks like. The warning from the source is clear, too. Without that active effort, we in our communities, we risk just drifting away on the world's currents, losing our vitality and our sense of mission.
Which leaves you with a pretty important question to maybe sit with. In your own life, in your communities, are you actively striving, putting in that effort for unity and obedience based on God's purpose? Or maybe without realizing it, are you kind of drifting, losing momentum?
Remember that final encouragement the source points to. Hold firmly to the word of life.